the session. We've done a lot of events here, and I want to start really by saying the delegation that I have the honor and privilege of serving with is a powerhouse for our community and for our state. So they do so much and get a fraction of the credit that they deserve for all of the great things that they do on your behalf during the session. But we do well because we have a great community that we serve. I mean, look at the turnout that's here on a Wednesday night at the dinner hour. So thanks to all of you for being engaged and for showing up at the Capitol and for giving us your emails and your ideas and your insight. Almost all of the ideas that we took and put into law came from you. And that's the beauty of the state legislature. Everyone, I think I'm safe to say, everyone up here has decided to run for neither the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House. I know Peter and I have. I think that's true for everyone else. Unless anyone wants to make some news tonight. And one of the reasons that I can say I made that decision is because I feel that we can get a tremendous amount done very quickly in the state legislature. As one person said, we get a fraction of the fancy dinners and none of the meetings with foreign ambassadors that you get if you're in Congress or the Senate. But that's not the reason I serve. That's not the reason any of these folks up here serve. We do it because we want to get things done, and we want to put laws into place that are going to help the people of New Mexico. We can do that quickly, and I think we can do that well in the state legislature. So Peter and I are going to go back and forth. I've got my timer set here for about 20 minutes because I do want to leave lots of time for questions from all of you. Peter has the best prop of the night, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But Peter and I met in December before the session started, and we've been, of course, I and members of the House have been out on the campaign trail. We've been hearing from you, and we have been talking with our then governor-elect, now Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Let's hear from Michelle. And we basically put together a wish list of things that we hoped we could start to tackle. And they were big ideas. One that I'm not ashamed or embarrassed to repeat over and over again was this idea of an education moonshot. So we started talking about that back in earnest in August after Judge Singleton's decision was made. And Senator Wirth and I met. We happened to be at a meeting of the National Conference of State Legislators. We met with some other legislative leaders and education committee chairs. And we decided at that table that we were going to deliver a session that met the charge given to us by Judge Singleton and start to get education turned around. And we agreed that we would work hand in hand in the House and the Senate, and that all of our staffs, the Education Study Committee and the Finance Committees, would also work. And so we instructed the staff to kind of tear down the barriers, the bureaucratic nonsense that goes on between different groups of different staff, and actually start working together on a unified plan. And right after that, I was at a campaign rally, and I said, we are going to deliver an education moonshot for New Mexico and work to save a generation of New Mexico's children from a life of poverty. And as soon as I said that, one of the folks on my staff said, what did you do? Like, moonshot, like, you just made this commitment. And I said, no, if we're gonna do this, we need to aim high. And so before I pass the mic back to Peter, I just want to say that when we met about 2 weeks after the legislative session, we met at Salazar Elementary, and the governor signed the education moonshot. And what that means is we are doing an almost 17% one-year increase in K-12 education, almost $500 million. Takes education funding over a combined $3 billion. We have a total now of almost $320 million every year for early childhood education. Every teacher in the state of New Mexico is going to get at least a 6% raise, at least, because there's room there for more. We took the at-risk formula and moved that up to a 25% index. And what that means is school districts like Santa Fe that have a high percentage of the student population whose students are at risk either because at risk sounds sometimes scarier than it really means, but it just means that you're at risk for having an achievement level below others in your cohort by age. And so sometimes it might be English language learners, sometimes it might be kids that come from severely impoverished households, students that are on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, all of these, and there's others that make those students quote unquote at risk. And so we're putting in a huge amount of money to flow directly to those school kids, combined with the focus from the governor, making sure that money ends up in the classroom, not in wasted bureaucracy. And we also extended the program K3+ to K5+. And for those of you who don't have very young kids in school, right now districts that wish to do so can opt into a program that extends the school year from kindergarten through the end of 3rd grade. So that you start, is it 4 weeks early and you go 4 weeks late? 25 days early and you go 25 days late. So we took K3+ and we bumped it up to K5+. So we gave 2 additional years in an extended school year, so there's less downtime or off time for the students, which is when they're students, right? And so they forget a lot of the stuff that they learn, and so we want to extend that. It's also great for parents. You would have to scramble a little bit less to find childcare for kids who are now up to the end of 5th grade. Districts have to apply for that. I hope the Santa Fe School Board will do so. That's kind of scratching the surface, because we also put a lot of policy changes in there for Indian language education, multicultural education, Spanish language education, and we did it in total cooperation to the point where the House and the Senate passed mirror versions of the bill, not just around the same time. We did it on the same day. We even debated it on the floor of the House and the Senate at the same time, so they would all go over to demonstrate to the state that this is a truly bicameral, bipartisan effort, and it was a great moment when the governor signed it into law. So that's one of our big highlights, and I think it'll pay big dividends out in the future. And with that, I'll pass it to Leader Wirth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's give it up for Brian Egolf. So it's a very cool thing to be here after 8 extraordinarily long years where we come to these sessions and we talk about battles and fighting for status quo, which was the win, quite frankly. And so all of a sudden to go through what we've been through and to come out the other side, not with everything, but with an amazing list of accomplishments, is a really not only satisfying thing for all of us, for a state that we're in, but it's something that New Mexico desperately needed. And thank God for Michelle Lujan Grisham. She is awesome. Having a governor that wants to govern, having a governor that's into the policy, having a governor that invested the time that she did in this session. She was there with us at every step of the way. And when we ran into roadblocks, they were solved in her office. And that was an extraordinary process to go through. And I just want to share with you the Friday night, and it'll go to my little prop here, the Friday night before we finished, because we've been going for 59 days, and the last big item on our list was the tax reform. We had a House bill that had really done bold things. We had a Senate bill that wasn't as bold. The question was, could we get somewhere in the middle? And Governor Lujan Grisham called up leadership into her office. I think we were up there starting about 11:30 Friday night. The floor of the Senate's still going, it's still running. So it's a little bit scary when I'm not down there and it's running. I get text messages, they're like, uh-oh, someone wants to do something they shouldn't do, and I gotta run down. So I didn't stay for the whole meeting. Went back down, finished up the floor, didn't reach resolution. I think I went home at 1:30 Saturday morning. We ended noon on Saturday. We still didn't have a tax deal. And that morning we came back at 7:30 in the cabinet room with the governor and sat there and negotiated a compromise on the tax deal. The big question then was, could we get this thing, A, drafted, which is not easy to do, and then through both chambers by noon. And thanks to a lot of hard work, we did it. It was very close in the Senate. Senator Pirtle came to me at 11:35 and he said, I'm not sure what we're going to do. And at that point, any member can shut the whole place down. And so we had a conversation and kind of talked about, hey, it's yours, you own it, you can take it down and we'll be back. And I said, we'll probably back in special session, it could be much worse. And so they decided at 10 minutes to 12 to let that bill go through, and it passed. And then I was just visiting with Brian before we started. So you finish this extraordinary marathon in 60 days, and all of a sudden you're sitting with the governor in the cabinet room with a bank of TV cameras, and you're on. I mean, this is the moment to kind of celebrate what's happened. And right before we went up, Chris Nordstrom, who's here, who's our press person in the Senate, who I appreciate tremendously, the staff on all sides, I know Speaker would say the same thing, absolutely critical to kind of holding us together. And so he helped do that with me many times, but we basically said, I said, hey, we had a list that we created in early January of things that we were going to do. Let's go find the list. And we found the list, and so I walked up just exhausted, hadn't slept in days, and I had this list dated January 2nd, 2019, and this is the list that I sat down with our staff, and I said, hey, these are things I think we should try and do. Moonshot, tax reform, minimum wage, film, energy RPS, ethics commission, water, omnibus criminal justice, decriminalization, the abortion bill, end of life, gun safety, and cannabis. That was the list. There's certainly things that weren't on that are important, but this was the list I had. And so what I did that morning, exhausted, is took out my blue pen and I just checked the boxes. We did the moonshot, you heard about it. Tax reform, you heard about that, we did that. Minimum wage, we were able to reach a compromise. The governor sat down with Senator Sanchez and Representative Miguel Garcia, and I was there, I think you were there, and we just sat down and they worked through the issue. They came up with something. It's going to move the minimum wage to $12. That is an amazing thing. 2 years ago, we were at $9. You know, it's a big deal. Is it perfect? It's not perfect. But let me just say, it was a big accomplishment to get there. Senator Nancy Rodriguez is a rock star. Bill, Senate Bill 2, she carried an amazing bill, and she'll talk about that. And did just an extraordinary job of navigating that through the process. We checked that box. RPS. We have an RPS standard that will take us to 100% by 2045. Clean energy is 80% by 2040, I think 50% by 2030, if I get those right. Unbelievable. Top 5 in the country. And so that is a big deal. We really had to battle to get an ethics commission done. Boy, that was difficult. It almost didn't happen. But we have, Speaker was showing me an amazing photo at 2 in the morning, one morning when the parties working on that kind of reached agreement. Water, I did have a bill that was vetoed that I really wanted her to sign, but I get it. Interstate Stream Commission, we were trying to change the makeup of the Interstate Stream Commission and to have the legislature make some of the appointments so you don't have these wild swings in water policy. It's very hard to take away power from the executive, and that's why I think that was vetoed. There's things I think we can do to make that happen. Big work done on criminal justice reform. There has been, big deal. We've had a bipartisan understanding in the legislature the last number of years that it's important, let's get the dangerous people locked up and let's get those that need treatment into treatment. Get them out of our facilities. So, I've said they're closing prisons in Texas and Utah, and here in New Mexico we've been trying to lock everybody up. Finally, we went the other direction. Terrific work done by Representative Mo Maestas and Senator Sandra Rue, a Republican. These bills were passing overwhelmingly, in some cases unanimously, in the Senate. The end of life and decriminalization abortion bills did not pass. And those were, we took a vote on the abortion bill on the Senate floor. 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to stop it. This is a 1969 statute that makes it a felony for a doctor to perform an abortion. It makes it a second-degree felony if the woman dies during the procedure. 15 years in prison, a second-degree felony. We were just trying to take the unconstitutional now statute off the books. first abortion bill on the Senate floor since 2005. Just to give you a sense, we just haven't had these votes. We took the vote. That was important. Our governor was going to sign it. That had to happen. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Roe versus Wade clearly makes this statute unconstitutional, but with the change potentially in the court, if that goes away, scary thing. Gun safety, we had some incredible accomplishments, including a background check bill, Moms Demand Action, and all the people that participated in the advocacy for that. It passed the Senate 22 to 20. After 4 votes, we were able to move in the last 24 hours to make that happen. And that bill was signed into law. There also was a bill dealing with orders of protection in domestic violence cases that was signed into law. The Extreme Risk Protection Bill passed the House, did not come to the floor of the Senate. That's one I think we'll work on down the road. And then the final thing on the list I had was cannabis. We didn't legalize it, but we decriminalized it. So we took a step forward. And let me just say the governor made it very clear that this is something she's going to put on the call for the 30-day session. So she wants a bill to do that, which is interesting. So I just want to say this, you know, and I think it's good, and you should give Brian a lay of the land. I mean, all the work that was done in the elections made the House a very different place this year. And I think that the Speaker and the House members that were here did an amazing job of fighting off this obstruction at every turn. I mean, I would leave 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Every car is in the parking lot till midnight or 1, over and over and over again. And so tell us a little bit about kind of what you were up against and what you all battled through, because I think that'll be interesting for folks to hear.
So after the last election, with the help of a lot of folks here, our majority went from 38-32 to 46-24. That was the largest margin in the House since 1995. And what that meant is that when I went to the new Republican leadership, a guy named Jim Townsend from Artesia, and I said to him, you know, we had a good, decent working relationship with your predecessor, Nate Gentry of Albuquerque. I said, Jim, by the end of this session, about halfway through, we would meet once or twice a week to sort of plan out big priorities, to take input from the minority to see what they thought was particularly important, to get them involved in some of the budgeting process and things like that. And I said, would you like to participate? And the answer was not just no, but hell no. They said that they were not in Santa Fe to make Democrat bills better, meaning they did not want us to incorporate any of their ideas or suggestions. And he said, we don't want anything, so we're not going to make any deals. We're just going to slow you down. And that was pretty disappointing. And what that meant is that even when bills were fairly not controversial, they would be debated an hour or 2 on the floor, even though they'd gone through hours of debate in committee. And that did make for a lot of late nights starting pretty early. I just, to have that sort of attitude, and I've been seeing on Twitter and in the newspapers from Carlsbad and Roswell and Farmington that the members, the Republican members who represent those areas, are going back and saying, well, it's the worst session they've ever had, and the Democrat leadership, and they say Democrat, not Democratic, to get under our skin, right? So they said the Democrat leadership didn't listen to us, and it's sort of disappointing. We're going to continue to try to see if they have things to add or to share to make the process better, but luckily we had the numbers that we didn't need their votes to pass anything. That wasn't the case for the prior 2 years, because we were able to go in spite of our numbers, we were still very, very unified. An amazing statistic is that in the House of Representatives, out of 70 members, 31 had 4 years of service or less. We had, out of 70 members, we had 20 freshmen. If you include Greg Schmiede's Republican member that was appointed by Governor Martinez. So what that means is that even though I've been in for 10 years, I think I'm number 8 in seniority, and Representative Trujillo, you're, I think, number 4, and you came in 2002, right? So I think that the large number of new members, also in our caucus, we are, for the first time in our state, a majority woman Democratic caucus, which is fantastic. We have 31 women in the House, so we're almost to a majority in the whole House. The Senate's almost there. But yeah, so the dynamic was, was one where we, for the most part, operated doing what we thought we needed to do that was best. The only 2 issues that I would add to the list that Peter gave before I turn it over to the members is that we did a massive stimulus bill. Senate Bill 280 was a capital outlay bill, and that has almost $1 billion of money for capital improvements in infrastructure. $9 million for our Santa Fe Airport to be expanded. We put money in for a new dormitory at the New Mexico School for the Arts. But there's about $400 million that's going to go to roads all over the state. We have about $6 billion of deferred maintenance, so this we're chipping away, but we're able to do all of it without putting it on a credit card, which is an unprecedented thing, right? So we are not having to sell bonds to come up with the money to do capital outlay right now because our surpluses are so enormous. We had a $2 billion surplus. About half of that was one time, half of that is recurring. We can expect the surplus will continue to get larger and larger every year, I think. And so we're using that money to diversify the economy so that we're not so reliant on oil and gas for our state's budget and for our state's economic future. But while the money is there, we might as well use it and be smart about it to help diversify our economy. The last thing I'll do in this bill kind of, I think is maybe the greatest environmental and conservation achievement since I've been in the legislature. I mean, it was House Bill 546. And it, for the first time, allows the state to tightly regulate produced wastewater from oil and gas operations. And it restores the ability for the state to impose fines on oil companies that violate the terms of the permits up to $25,000 a day. That authority was lost in 2012 after a court decision, so this puts back the ability to fine and punish bad operators in the oil and gas industry. And it allows the Governor's Water Quality Control Commission to put in strict rules and regulations on reusing produced water in further oil field operations. And what that means is, right now, when they are drilling for oil in southeast New Mexico, right now they're pumping about 100,000 acre-feet a year from the Ogallala aquifer to use on the oil fields. That is about 10 times the greater Santa Fe metropolitan area's use over a decade. And they're pumping that out of the Ogallala every year. So what this bill will do is it will allow them to stop pumping the Ogallala and recycle the water, at the very least, to save as much as 32 billion gallons of fresh potable water each year in southeast New Mexico, which is very, as you know, very arid and very dry. We've got to have the regulations put into place. That'll take about a year, so nothing's going to happen until the regs are there. But the ability for the state of New Mexico to save that much water every year and not have it injected down an oil well is a huge thing for the state. And I was very excited to see that done and have it be married up with the restoration of penalty authority. So those are the things. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, let me just do one quick thing, because I think it's important to give you all a sense of the makeup of the Senate. And just to understand the state Senate. And everyone's laughing, and I just want to, it's important to remember just 3 years ago, the state Senate was it. The House was controlled by Republicans in 2015 and 2016. We had a Republican governor, and thank goodness for the Democrats in the New Mexico State Senate, or we would have had a disaster. And the way it worked, and I just want to explain this to folks, is that some of the more conservative members were willing to allow the committee process to work so that the bad abortion bills that couldn't be stopped in the House were sent to committee and died and were not put on the floor. Had they been put on the floor, you saw this session what might have happened. Right to work, put into committee, not on the floor. And so we've been in a position where basically the Senate Democrats unified in a way I've not seen during those 2 years. And then we've been in a transition as we transition basically now to a position where, remember, 8 years of Republican governor means that a whole bunch of the members in both chambers, especially the House, have never served with a Democratic governor. They don't know what it means to work with a Democratic governor and how that works. And that's right. Well, it's an interesting. And these are people that have, Senator Candelaria, he was elected under Susana Martinez's administration, and so the transition as you switch gears and go from being status quo, which is a lot easier than being proactive, has some bumps, and we went through some of those bumps, and it was challenging. And I just wanted to throw that out there. One final thing I will just lay out for everyone, and again, talking about bills. So there was a bill that I have worked on for 15 years in trying to pass the corporate tax loophole that lets these out-of-state corporations expense profits out into Mexico and not pay corporate tax. Well, thanks in large part to the Speaker for his willingness to allow that bill to be part of the omnibus tax bill, that is now law. We finally. These are the kind of exciting things that have happened, and we're not going to talk. We'll work our way through, but I just want to share that with all of you. So